Welcome back to the Classical Guru. My opinion is the only opinion that matters. So it's the day after Valentine's Day, and let's be honest, this probably should not have been said on Valentine's Day, because we're going to talk about Castrati. Now, when I say this next sentence, every guy is going to tense up, but stay with me. Castrati were men that had been surgically or usually chemically castrated before their voices changed. So, before puberty, young. Historical records indicate that at one point, as many as 5,000 to 7,000 young boys a year were castrated in Europe. Things to know about castration. It did not affect their sex drive or their sexual appetite. These men were still very much sexually active. As a matter of fact, some of the noblewomen found this incredibly convenient because they could have affairs with these men and didn't have to worry about getting pregnant. As long as they stayed undercover, their illicit affair would remain in the shadows for everyone's convenience. Yikes. Additionally, if castration is performed before puberty, the voice maintains the range of a woman, so a soprano, mezzo-soprano, or contralto. The bones did not harden, the caps of the bones, and so the arms and legs were longer, and the rib cage was expanded. That's because testosterone, or most of it, was removed from the body because the testes were no longer there. This gave the castrati a very lanky, odd look, usually tall, with very round rib cages. The famed Farinelli, one of the most popular and powerful of all the musicos, or castratis, and they were called musicos, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, received the following review, and I'm going to read this directly. Farinelli drew everybody to the Haymarket. What a pipe, what modulation, what ecstasy to the ears, what heavens, what clumsiness, what stupidity, what offense to the eye. Thou must have observed with what ease and agility a cow heavy with calf. Thus from the mossy banks sprang the divine Farinelli. Yikes! It is believed that the practice of creating castrati started in Italy, having first appeared in Italy in the 16th century and predominantly remained in Italy, although it was practiced throughout Europe. The French developed a distaste for these men later in the time period, but they were certainly a part of the musical landscape in France in the early days of the castrati. The castrati who became singers were called musicos. They were not called castrati. Parents from impoverished backgrounds would often castrate their young sons in hopes that they would become a major opera singer and pull them and their family out of poverty. These men were powerful, and they were not super wealthy, but they were doing well and could upper middle class, if you can imagine that. With as many as 5,000 young men being castrated each year, one can easily imagine that very few of these men were ever successful. Most became church choir singers or scribes. The church opposed the practice of castration, but they took them in. The practice continued up well into the 19th century. The last castrati died in the 1920s. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put a link below YouTube recording of him singing. He's not known for being a particularly great singer, but it'll give you an idea of what these men sounded like. The musico roles in opera began as secondary roles. We have them as early as Monteverdi's Orfeo. But by the 1670s and 80s, they became the primo uomo, the primary male singer. At one point, these men were so powerful that they literally could rewrite an opera. Let's say that a famous musico came in to perform an opera by a composer, Handel. Okay, we'll do Handel. Incredibly popular. However, this guy decided that an aria by Telemann, German composer, displayed their voice better. Regardless of the text or the drama, they could inform the music director, who was often the conductor and the composer, that they were going to substitute another composer's aria. They had that much power. Imagine, if you will, a Broadway musical, and let's say our star is Taylor Swift. She's undeniably a genius and extremely popular. So she would come in for a production of the musical My Fair Lady. Okay, great music in that. But she'll say, you know what? I'm not going to sing I Could Have Danced All Night. Instead, I'm going to sing I Have Confidence from The Sound of Music. And they just had to go with it. Folks, that's power. These men were incredibly powerful. Now, you can probably just imagine that with this much power and the fact that these operas were being rewritten, completely destroyed, and the drama was idiotic, that this became a problem. And it did. It became such a problem that it's going to lead to our next discussion in opera history, which is opera reform. It won't be nearly as interesting or as involved as this one, but I wanted to give you an overview of how opera has evolved. It's interesting because this is really a part of an ongoing dialogue among opera composers and librettists, the people that write the words, and people that love opera. And it continues till today. Which is more important, the words and the drama or the music? We've actually truly only had one composer that came along and said they were both equally important. And they were equally important along with the rest of the arts. And that will lead us to yet another discussion, Wagner. Now, for those of you that are following along and that know anything about music history, you seriously have to give me props for managing to work Wagner into a discussion of Castrati. That's smart. Thank you for seeing the Classical Guru. I'll see you next time. Peace out. Here on the Classical Guru, my opinion is the only opinion that matters.